We're just 1 week into the start of the new FPL season and people are already considering playing their free hit or their wildcard this week after things didn't go quite as planned maybe in the first week for your team. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at a wildcard draft and at a free hit draft. We're going to talk about a few other questions they were asking, like Erling Haaland, what to do with a couple of other transfers going into the game week 2. But really, we're focusing on two chips, the wildcard and the free hit, and what a draft would look like if you wanted to play one this week. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim, and subscribe if you are new around here. I hope you've had a good start to the week. This is an additional video to what you're usually meant to expect from me in the transfer plans, then wait for the transfer targets video on a Wednesday. Because it's early and because we've had double chips this season, there is more sort of inclination for people to play a wildcard or a free hit maybe a little bit earlier on in the season. And particularly because game week 1 didn't go quite as well, we're going to look at a couple of drafts later on in this video. Just before we go and dive into those though, I do want to cover a few things that were asked an awful lot in the comments of my transfer plans video. In that video, I tend to discuss a lot of what's reflected on my team and what's going on. And as a result, I probably didn't cover Erling Haaland enough. I didn't really mention him at all, basically, because I don't plan on bringing him in this week. It would require a -4 for my team, and I'm not going to do that, particularly because he's playing a Spurs team that, although they were really bad last year, we do expect probably to play a back 5 against Manchester City and just generally give up less chances. But I also tweeted about Erling Haaland. My general opinions on him is that a brace against Wolves shouldn't really change our opinion on him and Manchester City as a team. I think, yes, I saw more from Manchester City in that game than I did towards the end of last season. And also, Manchester City and Haaland in particular does tend to start season strongly. And if game week 1 is anything to go by, that is something that we could definitely expect to continue. But if you do look at the next 4 fixtures that they have, none of them are as easy as you're probably going to expect for a Wolves away fixture like he had in game week 1. Now, as an owner of a Wolves defender, the fact that I continue to say over the past couple of days that, yeah, it was Wolves, it does make me question quite why I own Agbadu in my team at the moment. But at the moment, I don't have a plan to move sideways from Salah to Haaland or from Palmer to Haaland in game week 2. I might look at it in game week 3, for example, if Watkins blanks again and if Palmer blanks again, or if Salah blanks again, no, not blanks again, if he blanks and doesn't look involved like he didn't really on Friday night, then I might start to consider it. Once I've got 2 transfers, once I've had a couple of weeks of information, then I might start to consider like a Palmer down to a cheaper midfielder and an upgrade of a Watkins or an upgrade of a João Pedro to go and buy Erling Haaland. That is something that I will consider, but it's just not something I'm going to force in this week. I do expect him to do well. That's never been it. I've never not wanted to own him because I don't think he's a good pick. I just still think at 14 million and 14.5 for Mo Salah, I particularly only want one of those in my draft at the moment. And I think I still feel that way a little bit, except for Cole Palmer. I think Cole Palmer has been in so many drafts that if he's going to continue to play the role that he does for Chelsea, he's not going to be worth 10.5 million. So suddenly a Salah Haaland draft becomes a lot more viable. The other reason that Salah Haaland drafts are looking great at the moment is not only Palmer blanked, but Saka blanked, Bruno blanked, Wirtz blanked, and Watkins blanked. So basically, the 5 players that we owned instead of owning Salah and Haaland together, basically all blanked. And that is why people are suddenly clambering to try and get on a Salah and Haaland draft early. I think Haaland is going to be a good pick. I think he'll probably do better than he did last year, but Manchester City did massively underperform. And if it continues the way it's continuing, I 100% will have to find a strategy to go and buy him into my team. But I just don't think going straight and doing it into game week 2, when he's got some more difficult fixtures than he had in game week 1, whilst all those other players blanked but may well do well in game week 2, is quite the time to go and do it, is basically where I'm at. I'll keep an eye on it. And if in game week 2 we see blanks for Palmer, João Pedro, Watkins again, and maybe Salah, then maybe in game week 3 I will look to buy Erling Haaland, and maybe that will be my 2 transfers then. But at the moment for this week, it's not going to be my direct transfer that I plan on using. Next up, is Palmer worth it? So that's really what I've just spoken about. As a Chelsea fan, it frustrates me so much that we see him do so well in the Club World Cup, playing on the right-hand side of the pitch, and then we go into game week 1 and he's back playing on that left side of the pitch where he's less comfortable. He looks out of place and he's just much less in terms of goal threat. And we saw it again. We need to play him on that right-hand side, either in the right 10 or either on that right wing. And with Neto, with Gittins, with Esteval, it's unlikely that we're going to play him in that right wing position, which is what he played in the Club World Cup. So he needs to be on that side of the pitch. And if he's going to be out on the left, as I said in my transfer plans video, he's categorically not worth the money. So I am, again, keeping an eye on him. And if he continues playing that position, I will look to sell him. And maybe Haaland is the way that I go with him. Next up is what to do with Konza. I don't think it's worth a transfer. It's just a 1-game ban for him. He'll be back in game week 3. It is what it is for him. And yeah, you've just probably got to bench him. I wouldn't use your first transfer on that. Next is what to do with Marmoush. That is a transfer I probably would look to make because him not being in the team is a big concern. And him being 8.5 and just not being nailed is just too much of a risk. He might come back into the team for Spurs at home, but given how well Reinders played, basically in that position, is too much of a concern. I would look to sell him. Similar for Gvardiol. Now, we might get to the press conference and he might be back, and that might be enough for him to come back into the team and you keep him. So wait for the press conference, but if he's out, you probably do need to sell him. Next up is Frimpong. Apparently got taken off because he felt his hamstring. That was the only real reason he came off before 60. So if he is going to be out, then yes, you might need to sell him. But if he's fine, he's still a keep. Jared Byrne and Fulkrog. West Ham were probably the big disappointment. A lot of people bought West Ham for game week 1 because of the fixture against Sunderland. And I did say in pre-season a lot, what will you do if West Ham players blank in game week 1 and suddenly they walk into a run of fixtures that now looks like they have? I particularly spoke about it when I spoke about Diouf in defence, not so much about the attackers, but it now paints a similar picture. Bowen will get returns and Fulkrog is fine at his value. But now looking at the fixtures that they've got, I don't really think they're the best picks at their price. Fulkrog, I'd much rather Thiago. I'd much rather go and buy Strand Larsen, who I was really impressed with. And Bowen, like the 7.5s in Mateta and Chris Wood, maybe João Pedro, in Dominic Solanke if he's going to be available. Going up to Ekitike at 8.5. You know, you've got Watkins, you might want Gyökeres. Jared Byrne, I just don't think was good value at 8 million. So I probably would look to sell Bowen. It's not a priority this week. If you want to wait 1 week, for example, and then in game week 3 do Palmer down to a cheap option and go Bowen up to Haaland, that's absolutely fine. You don't need to do it this week. But with West Ham, I'm a little bit concerned. Well, I'm very concerned about what I saw in game week 1. Now, just before we have a look at those 2 drafts, a reminder that I've started a newsletter this season with Oscar, FPL Focal, and Ross, FPL Raptor, 2 of my best friends in the community. It is so much fun every week getting to do a little bit of content with them. It is a free newsletter that every single Thursday we send out to your email. It takes about 5 seconds to sign up. You click the link, it will be in the bio, or you can just search rap.tips/subscribe, put your email in and you get the sign up. We get an update on our teams. We talk about things like players to buy. We talk about captaincy, just stuff to get you ready for the weekend. And as anything, it just offers us a good reminder that you don't miss the deadline. Also, we've just released on a Monday. Every single Monday, we have a premium version of the newsletter. If you are considering signing up and you want a bit more extra content at the beginning of the week, it has things like our early transfer plans for all 3 of us. We talk about a player to consider buying from every position. We have fixture tickers, we have odds and things like that. And we also have a voice note from one of us. So I did the one going into game week 1. Ross has done the one from yesterday where he talks about reactionary and sort of proactive transfers as well. So if you want to have a sort of look at it, of course, you can just sign up for the free one. You don't need the premium one. Completely free. You just need an email. The link is in the description. So let's look at those drafts. We're going to start off with the free hit draft. So looking at a team just for game week 2. And the real reason you'd probably do that is Arsenal, right? So we've put triple Arsenal in this draft. We've gone with Gabriel in defense. You could go with Saliba, who did get DEFCON in that game. Although at home to Leeds, I'm recording before Leeds Everton as a disclaimer. I probably don't expect DEFCON for any of the Arsenal defenders in that game. We've gone with Saka, we've gone with Gyökeres. I would take the punt on Gyökeres. I was tempted to go with Odegaard in midfield just because I think the minutes will be better. You could also go with Declan Rice and maybe free up money to go for someone like a Watkins, for example, in this draft. But I have taken the punt on Gyökeres just because if they are going to score a lot of goals, you've got to expect that he's going to be involved to some extent. But Saka would get the armband just because of reliability of minutes, and we know what he's like in the Premier League. In defence, we've gone with Cucurella and Munoz. Good clean sheet potential, but also good attacking threat from both of them. And we've gone with Petrovic in goal. If you wanted to save a bit of money and, move it around a bit, you could go with Dubravka. He is the option that we've gone in defence, but just because of the way they defended against Spurs, I don't really want to start him in the free hit this week. Into midfield, we've gone with a few cheaper options. So I have opted for a bit of Aston Villa in Rodgers just because Brentford were awful in game week 1. I've gone with Semenyo of Bournemouth as the option. Again, he did really well in game week 1, and we've gone with Reinders. And up front, it's João Pedro, Gyökeres and Erling Haaland. We do have a bit of cover in Anderson, Esteve and Ronaldo on the bench. Of course, with good fixtures this week and good performances from some of those in game week 1 as well. The key omissions for me here, of course, there's no Liverpool. Going away to Newcastle is not the easiest game. And if I was on free hit, I probably would look to take it on. You could look to try and free up a bit of money to do a Rodgers up to a Gakpo, for example. So to do that, you could just take money out of Anderson and go and get Gakpo as your midfield instead of Rodgers. You could try and fit in Cole Palmer if you wanted to do that, but you'd probably have to sell Gyökeres to Declan Rice and sell João Pedro and play a 3-5-2 as an example if you wanted João Pedro, if you wanted Palmer as your Chelsea player. So I have gone with this, and I know Villa and Chelsea were not great in game week 1, but their fixtures in game week 2 are nice. You've got Manchester City here, although I do think their fixture is more difficult this week than it was in game week 1, and really it's target Arsenal with Leeds at home with the triple up. And then let's take a look at the wildcard draft. So we've gone with Sanchez in goal with Dubravka on the bench. Into defence, Gabriel and Munoz are in there. And we've actually gone with Esteve to start this week for Sunderland at home because it allows you to have both Anderson of Fulham and Van der Ven of Spurs as the cheap options on the bench that can rotate really nicely from when game week 3 does roll around and you play Esteve just for 1 week this week. We have changed things up and we've gone for a 3-4-3. And that means we've taken lots of money out of midfield. We've gone with Salah, Semenyo, Reinders and Anderson as the cheaper options. Semenyo is mid-priced and we've stuck with Salah. Mateta, Chris Wood and Erling Haaland up front and King as the cheap option. He's playing number 10 for Fulham. He also got a lot of DEFCON for the way he was playing in that game as well. I would be really cautious of playing your wildcard this week because this team looks great based on performances that we got in game week 1. And that is because Palmer blanked, as I said, Saka blanked. You've also got Bruno blanked, Wirtz blanked, Watkins blanked, João Pedro blanked. But we could easily get to the end of game week 2 and suddenly the Salah-Haaland combination doesn't look good. And you might decide to wildcard and not go Salah anymore. You might have seen enough and think that Gakpo and Wirtz or Gakpo and Ekitike, who are not in this draft, is worth it. But I still think that Salah-Haaland, right now, I would want to go with Salah. And if a lot of people are wildcarding because they want Haaland, then you probably are best off going with both. But if suddenly those sort of mid-premiums start to do really well and you've wildcarded to take them out because your team didn't perform well enough in game week 1, I would be really cautious of it. A lot of people have asked for a game week 2 wildcard. And if you are wildcarding game week 2, it's probably because you want to change a lot, right? If you're just going to wildcard just to move Salah to Haaland, I wouldn't wildcard and I'd just take a -4 to do that because the wildcard is much more powerful to do that. So basically, to summarize, I don't love the wildcard this week. If you've gone Salah and you want to wildcard, it's probably because you want to do a whole lot of restructuring, and that is taking out all those mid-price premiums because they blanked. But they could very well do well over the next few weeks. So if all you're wildcarding for is really to swap Salah for Haaland because you think you've seen enough, then just take a -4 to do it, or maybe take a -8. If you are so sure that Haaland is better than Salah, then maybe take a -4 or -8 to do it because the wildcard is more valuable than a -4 or a -8. If you are fully convinced that you want to do a whole lot of restructure and take the money out of those premiums, go Salah, Haaland and change a lot of things, then this is probably what I would look to do if I was forced to wildcard this week. But I'm really not a fan of a game week 2 wildcard. As I say, just because a player blanks in a single week doesn't make them a bad pick all of a sudden, and it might swing back next week. And if it continues for game week 1 into game week 2 and maybe game week 3, then yes, a wildcard is considered early, but I'm really cautious of playing it in game week 2. It just feels like 1 week of data is not enough to suddenly make such big decisions. And your next wildcard is probably not going to be played until game week 30. And if you think you've got enough information to wildcard a team for 28 weeks or whatever it is, then that's fine. But I'm just trying to offer a little bit of word of caution. But if that's what you want to do, then absolutely go for it. Something like this is what I would look at, but I'm not going to be playing the chip this week. I'm going to be waiting and hopefully things turn around a little bit because my game week 1 team didn't do quite as well. Anyway, I hope you did well in the Everton Leeds game. If you've got players to play in that, if your game week has not started well, it's just 1 week and a lot of people have not started as well as they want. Me at 3.7 million before that game, that's likely to drop even further with the amount of ownership for the likes of Dewsbury Hall, Tarkowski and Dye, some people with some Leeds players in there as well. So we're going to go again in game week 2. If you want to play a free hit or you want to play a wild card, these are the drafts that I've put together. Of course, depending on what premiums you like, depending on what you saw in game week 1, will massively dictate what you go with this week. Anyway, if you are rolling the transfer like me this week, let's have a little bit of patience. Let's review it as we get towards the end of the week. Once we get press conferences and, of course, a Friday deadline where hopefully Palmer and João Pedro will return to the points on Friday evening. That is the hope. Thank you all for watching. Any questions, as I said, drop it all in the comment section down below. I spent a lot of time on Sunday evening and Monday morning replying to comments on my transfer plans video, so make sure you leave any questions on this video as well. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.